Pope Francis is ushering in a new era for the Catholic Church, and so are the crowds. Take a look at this image. It was taken on March 13th, the day Francis was elected.
One of the many challenges Pope Francis will face is getting the Vatican's financial house in order. Mark Phillips looked at the Church's history of secrecy and scandal.
The Vatican is more than the world's largest religious institution. It's a business in trouble. There are backroom financial scandals at Vatican Inc. In an old stone tower behind the papal apartment is the Vatican Bank. The Church's various departments, its priests and employees keep accounts here. Secret accounts, hidden from the prying eyes of international regulators. An Italian court investigating the bank found documents showing some accounts had been used for money laundering and other illegal, and for the Church highly embarrassing, activities. Vatican watchers like Marco Politi have studied the court documents that verified the bank's transactions have not always been kosher.
There was money of the mafia who was recycled through the channels of the Vatican Bank, and also bribe money to political parties in Italy went through the Vatican Bank.
With dark financial clouds hanging over the Vatican, the European Union insisted the bank open its accounts to public scrutiny. When it was too slow, tourists felt the pinch. When European bankers suspended the Vatican's credit card facilities, visitors couldn't use plastic to buy Sistine Chapel tickets. $30 million of Vatican money in Italian banks was seized and only released when the Church promised to reform. Now Swiss lawyer René Brulhart, who helped clean up other secretive European banks, has been brought in. But still the bank keeps many of its dealings private and not just from outsiders. South African Cardinal Wilfred Napier, who sits on a committee that's supposed to sign off on the Vatican's books, told us he still can't get the information he needs.
I'm one of those 15 cardinals that sits on that committee, and we sign our name to the report. I want to know that I'm signing something that is actually reflecting the truth.
There's another scandal with a girl who disappeared in the Vatican 20 years ago, and they say they may have found her remains. The Italian police are leading the investigation, but instead of helping them, the Vatican is obstructing the investigation. It's likely they knew about this and stayed silent. And on top of all those cases of pedophilia, this is just disgusting.
The list of controversial events involving Catholic priests or Vatican officials reads like a tabloid. Reports of sex abuse, pedophilia accusations, alleged large-scale corruption, and possible ties with the mafia. While the media, especially in Italy, has been having a field day with the scandals, the Vatican either stayed silent or rebuffed all accusations.
Well, David Lorenz, a director of a group called the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, doubts the new Pope will bring much change to the Vatican.
Nikki Davis says she was sexually abused by a Catholic brother, but she's no longer afraid to talk about it. Yet she says she knows of 2 other child abuse survivors who say they've been threatened not to talk to the Royal Commission.
Some victims are reporting having received death threats because the information, the knowledge that they have, their personal experience is too damaging to the Catholic Church.
Facebook in particular is the most appalling spying machine that has ever been invented. Here we have the world's most comprehensive database about people, their relationships, their names, their addresses, their locations, their communications with each other, their relatives. all sitting within the United States, all accessible to US intelligence. Facebook, Google, Yahoo, all these major US organizations have built-in interfaces for US intelligence. It's not a matter of serving a subpoena. They have an interface that they have developed for US intelligence to use. Now, is it the case that Facebook is actually run by US intelligence? No, it's not like that. It's simply that US intelligence is able to bring to bear legal and political pressure to them, and it's costly for them to hand out records and one by one, so they have automated the process. Everyone should understand that when they add their friends to Facebook, they are doing free work for United States intelligence agencies in building this database for them. And every other intelligence agency that can either hack Facebook or who can do a favor with US intelligence.
Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The law was expanded back in 2008, and it allows the NSA to spy on Americans without a warrant.
And essentially, this would extend the government's power to warrantlessly wiretap Americans for another 5 years.
2 U.S. senators have asked the NSA just how many people it's spied on, but the agency's keeping their lips sealed, and you'll never guess why. They say dishing that information would violate your privacy.
Do you ever feel like someone's watching you? Well, if you're a UK citizen, the government is attempting to step up its public surveillance policy and even snooping on your personal emails. Despite CCTV cameras already a major fact of UK life, there's now plans to store personal data, including information from social networking sites. As RT's Ivor Bennett reports, it's the taxpayer who could be footing the bill.
Soon you could be watched everywhere you go in the UK, even where the cameras can't see you. All your emails, texts and phone calls will be monitored under a new anti-terror spy plan. The government will know which websites you visit. It'll even snoop on your private Facebook messages. No matter who you are, all your personal data will be stored for a year in a massive surveillance operation privacy campaigners condemn.
Britain's already one of the most watched societies in the world. The number of CCTV cameras is estimated at nearly 2 million. Now the government wants to monitor all electronic communication as well, including social media, taking surveillance to a level never seen before.
Just what you say in calls and messages won't be kept, but the government will know exactly who you speak to, when you do it, and where you are. It'll be stored by broadband and mobile companies, but security services will have real-time access at the click of a button, secretly living your life with you. Digital rights groups say it'll leave people living in fear of Big Brother.
For 2 years, every single tweet sent in the US has been stored in a massive archive.
It's the ones being watched who are paying for it too. Cybersecurity experts predict it'll cost taxpayers over $1 billion to be spied on. Even then, there's no guarantee they'll be safe from other prying eyes.
Clear yet why the FBI would neglect to tell activists that there was a potential assassination plot surrounding them. What we do know is that new documents obtained by the Partnership for the Civil Justice Fund, a U.S. human and civil rights advocacy organization, have revealed that the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. military, and private corporations all cooperated together to monitor and investigate Occupy Wall Street protesters as, quote, domestic terrorists and, quote, criminals. Now, the more shocking revelation, the headline of this story, is that reportedly buried deep within the government file, mentions of a plan to use snipers to assassinate Occupy protesters and the movement's leaders in various cities throughout the country. These
video cameras caught trucks arriving at the World Trade Center from about August 23rd until every night until about September 2nd, September 3rd. And the trucks were arriving at about 3 o'clock in the morning when everybody else had left the building, including the janitorial trucks. And the trucks were leaving at 5 a.m. right before the AAA personalities of Wall Street got to work to start their day. Something was brought into that building that would help with the detonation. There may have been work done on the detonation before. It may have been going on for months, but whatever they needed at the very end, they came and brought in that 10-day period.
The purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government. What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously. There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goal of the Roman Catholics.
Now, many of you are going to remember this story here. It says Pope Francis assures atheists you don't have to believe in God to go to heaven. This was kind of a big deal when this first came out, made worldwide news. But recently another story just developed around the Pope that connects with this, and I want to show you that as well, but let me also just explain a few things here. This is the Pope's role. This is what he's supposed to be doing right now. Do you see? It's not just this connection with the atheists. That's all a part of it, but it really is a dismantling of the old ways, okay? And it's going to be opening the window up to a whole new way, which is going to be this Antichrist system, the New World Order, the Illuminati, you know, whatever you want to call them, but this is what's on the way. So now here's one that's more kind of on the spiritual tip, and this is from, it's been a few years ago now, but Pope Francis had taken a trip to Korea, and during this trip he had announced his own imminent death in the next 2 or 3 years. But it wasn't so much about the announcement, it was more about this picture right here. This is from that trip. I thought it was interesting that during this trip where he announces his own death, he's on this podium here, and behind him is this strange looking kind of statue, of course, with a man, it looks like a man's face, with one of his eyes darkened out. Now this goes back, of course, to all the Illuminati mythology that a lot of us research and pick up on. The whole idea, of course, of the Antichrist having one eye, the all-seeing eye. I just thought it was very interesting that we find the symbol of the Antichrist behind this false prophet during his meeting in Korea.
Recently, the chief exorcist at the Vatican reported that the devil was in the Vatican.
Morgan. Wolf, Reverend Gabriele Amorth made headlines around the world recently when he said the devil was present in the Vatican.
You're talking about something very real, aren't you?
Certo, realissima. Vi dico, se credete al Vangelo, credete all'esistenza del demonio.
Absolutely, very real.
As to the devil's presence in the Vatican, he says that's no surprise. He once had to perform an exorcism on another exorcist.
The first thing we need to do if we're going to find out if the devil is at the Vatican is take a tour underneath the Vatican. As we arrive underneath the Vatican, we see that it is laid out in a number of rooms marked by letters, as we can see in this aerial view map. Now we will be exploring some of the rooms in this map. Let's start off by looking in room C here. As we look into the room, we see that this is a mausoleum of Lucius Tullius Zethus. The Vatican goes on and explains that this room was used for offerings to the dead. We read, view of the north wall and mosaic floor. In the corners of the mosaic floor there are 8 marble squares with circular holes through which offerings to the dead were poured during the funeral rites carried out in the burial chamber. So here we have a room where offerings are done to the dead. That's pretty common in Catholicism. Now if we look in the next room, room E, so here in this room they have a vase which has the image of a Medusa. So here underneath the Vatican we have a Medusa. Again, we ask ourselves the question, this is a vase, but yet it's kept underneath the Vatican. This could have easily been removed. If the Vatican was a holy church, you would think that they would have done this. You think underneath the Vatican they would have things that are sacred to Christ and not foreign gods, not idols and images of foreign gods. Now as we move down further to room H, here we see that this is a mausoleum that is one of the largest and most luxurious mausoleums underneath the Vatican of St. Peter's Basilica. It says that it was built at the beginning of the second half of the 2nd century during the reign of Emperor Marcus Aurelius and belonging to a freedman of the important Valeri family. And as we're in this mausoleum, we see that there's lots of idols, from the old Roman Empire. We ask ourselves, why does Rome keep these idols down underneath St. Peter's Basilica? You would think if they were Christians, they would want to clean all this out. I can't imagine anybody who has a true church would keep idols in their churches, especially pagan idols left over from a bygone pagan era. But here we have the Vatican keeping many pagan idols underneath St. Peter's Basilica. Here is an idol the Vatican is displaying of a head of a child in gilded stucco and a lock of a hair typical of one initiated into the cult of Isis. And this particular idol is an idol of a boy who was initiated into the cult of Isis. If we look in this room, we see that some of the stucco decorating the walls. Here we have a personification of Oceanus. We remember the New Testament book of Revelation says that a beast comes out of the ocean. And so we say, why is the Vatican having these foreign gods underneath its basilica? Why is it protecting them? If it was a true church, it couldn't be doing it for the sake of art, especially with all the evil things that are happening in the Vatican. And as the priest earlier said, that evil does exist, the devil is real, as he admitted. But the hypocrisy of all of this is that they have all these evil images and idols underneath the Vatican of St. Peter's Basilica. We also see two figures of genuses with bat wings also portrayed on the walls. Again, this is supposed to be a holy church and a holy place. Now this is supposedly all there for many, many years. As we move into the next room, room I, the details of the mosaic floor with Mercury and Pluto's chariot, they go on and explain that this theme is an explicit reference to the overcoming of death and the return of the afterlife. They describe it as a splendid mosaic floor of Mercury is depicted carrying a caduceus with wings at his ankles, walking in front, and a chariot carrying Pluto and his wife Persephone. So here we have all these Roman gods underneath the Vatican, images of foreign gods. Well, as we move to the next room, we find out why they keep all these idols down there in these images. As we move to room U, here we find the shock of all shocks. Here on the wall, it says there is a depiction of Lucifer, that is, the light bearer, the morning star. On the opposite of the wall, there is a drawing of Vesper, the evening star, cosmic symbol of the human life cycle. We find out that when we get to room U, here we have a clear depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican at St. Peter's Basilica. We ask ourselves, why are they keeping this image of Lucifer underneath the Vatican? Again, you would think if you're a Christian church, you would not want to have any of these images. Now we know that they'll go on and say, oh, well, we're saving it because it's a UNESCO heritage site or something like that. This is always their excuse, saving it for the sake of art. But for the true Christian, this is not an excuse, because we know if you're giving glory and propaganda to false deities and false pagan gods, what are you doing? You're in essence supporting the evil spiritual realm. This cannot be from God. And since Rome claims itself to be the one true church, you would think they would lead by example. But what kind of example is this? That you have a depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican for countless hundreds and hundreds of years? Now this image here underneath the Vatican has been there since their claim, which would be Constantine. We would know that he was the first one that built this basilica. And so again we ask ourselves, why are they keeping this depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican? Well, we think the answer for why all these images, idols, are kept underneath the Vatican is because what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with an apostate church that has always been apostate. And even now, as it is filled with Freemasons. And so we know that the reason why they're keeping all of this there now, and they're actually revealing this on their internet website, is because they want people to see this. They want people to see what they're really all about. For the masses who believe that Rome is still a pure church, they don't mind deceiving them into believing that they are still a Christian church. As you go down underneath the Vatican, down into the next rooms, they will try to convince you on this tour that you take that Peter is buried down there in one of the rooms and that this gives credence to following the Pope. But we ask the question, why would you want to follow a Pope who has all these evil things underneath his church? It's very clear by this depiction of Lucifer that the devil is in the Vatican. He's hidden way down underneath the Vatican St. Peter's Basilica. Now, if you are a Catholic and you are watching this video, we want to encourage you to come out of that church. As you can see from these images and these idols that are kept underneath your church, we would hope that you would soberly think about these things and ask yourself the question, if my church is a true church, why is it promoting these things? Why does it even want people to see these things? We would hope that you would hear the exhortation of Revelation 18, verse 4, where it says, I heard another voice from heaven say, come out of her, my friends, that you may not participate in her sins, that you may not receive of her plagues, for her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her. And we can also imagine what kind of things are done down there underneath the Vatican. And we want to say, in closing this video, that God's judgment does sleep. And sometimes it sleeps for a long time. But when his judgment awakes, hopefully it will not be too late for you. And our prayer for you is that you would find a refuge in faith in Jesus Christ, and that you would follow him and not the false religion of